blood
I can't
dripped
move.
onto
You
the
have to.
snow as
Yeah, we're
Harold
almost
Bennett
there.
collapsed
Follow the
at the
dog
stranger's door. His frozen hands clutched a blood-stained envelope, his body broken from 6 hours fleeing through a blizzard that should have killed him. His wife Eleanor crumpled beside him, her lips blue, her breath barely a whisper. The old man's eyes locked onto Marcus Stone, a former Navy SEAL who had spent 2 years hiding from the world, and rasped 4 words that would shatter everything: "They murdered our son." Then his grip went slack. His eyes rolled back. And Marcus Stone, the man who had sworn never to save anyone again, caught a dying stranger in his arms and made a choice that would bring a senator, a corporation, and an entire mountain to its knees. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story moves you, hit subscribe and stay until the very end. Your support means everything, and we can't wait to see how far this story travels. The knock came at 11:47 p.m. Marcus Stone knew the exact time because he had been staring at the old military watch on his wrist, counting the seconds between gusts of wind waiting for the storm to either kill the power or rip the roof off his cabin. He had survived worse. He had survived things that would break most men. But tonight, something felt different. Shadow lifted his head first, the German shepherd's ears rotated forward, his amber eyes narrowing toward the door. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Easy," Marcus murmured. But Shadow didn't relax. The dog rose to his feet, muscles coiled hackles rising along his spine. Then Marcus heard it too. A knock. Faint, desperate, barely audible over the howling wind. His hand moved instinctively to the survival knife on the table beside him. 12 years as a Navy SEAL had wired certain responses into his nervous system. Unexpected sounds meant danger. Unfamiliar visitors meant threats. Trust no one. Verify everything. Another knock. Weaker this time. "Who the hell climbs this ridge in a blizzard?" Marcus said under his breath. Shadow whined, pawing at the door. Marcus grabbed his coat and crossed the room in 3 strides. He paused with his hand on the latch, listening. The wind screamed. Snow pelted the windows like thrown gravel. And beneath it all, he heard something that made his blood run cold. A woman's voice, thin, breaking. "Please, please help us." Marcus threw open the door. The wind hit him like a fist, driving snow into his eyes, stealing his breath. But he barely noticed. Because standing in the swirling white were 2 figures, an elderly couple clinging to each other, trembling so violently they looked like they might shatter. The man was in his late 70s, tall, but bent his face a road map of hard years and harder choices. Blood seeped through a tear in his jacket, dark against the snow. His eyes deep-set and fierce, locked onto Marcus with desperate intensity. The woman beside him was smaller, frailer, her silver hair plastered to her cheeks in frozen strands. She wore a coat so thin it might as well have been paper. Her lips had turned blue. "Please," she whispered again. We can't walk anymore." Then the old man's knees buckled. Marcus lunged forward, catching him before he hit the ground. The man weighed almost nothing, just bones and willpower, and whatever stubborn force had kept him climbing through a blizzard that should have killed him hours ago. Shadow was already beside the woman, pressing his warm body against her legs, guiding her toward the doorway. "Get inside," Marcus commanded. "Now!" He half-carried, half-dragged the old man across the threshold. The woman stumbled after them, Shadow herding her like a lost sheep. Marcus kicked the door shut, and suddenly the roar of the storm became a muffled howl. The silence inside felt almost violent. Marcus lowered the old man onto the cot near the wood stove. The man's breathing was shallow, ragged, each exhale a visible effort. The wound on his side was worse than Marcus had thought, a deep gash, possibly from a blade, definitely deliberate. "Who did this to you?" Marcus demanded. The old man's eyes fluttered open. His hand shot out, grabbing Marcus's wrist with surprising strength. His fingers were ice cold, but his grip was iron. "They murdered our son." The words hit Marcus like a bullet to the chest. "What? They murdered our son!" The old man's voice cracked. He fumbled inside his jacket with his free hand, pulling out a blood-stained envelope. This is proof. You have to. His eyes rolled back. His grip went slack. His head fell to the side. "Harold!" The woman scrambled toward him, nearly falling. "Harold, no, 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 no!" Marcus pressed 2 fingers to the old man's neck. The pulse was there, weak, thready, but present. "He's alive," Marcus said quickly. "He's alive. But he's lost blood and he's hypothermic. I need to work on him. Can you tell me what happened?" The woman. Eleanor. He would learn later, stared at him with eyes that held decades of love and terror and grief. "They're going to kill us," she whispered. "Just like they killed Jake." Marcus worked through the night. He stripped the wet clothes from both of them, wrapped them in every blanket he owned, positioned them near the stove where the heat was strongest. He cleaned Harold's wound with hands that hadn't touched another human being in 2 years, stitched it with a suture kit from his emergency supplies, and prayed that his field medic training hadn't completely faded. Shadow never left Eleanor's side. The dog lay pressed against her, sharing his warmth, his head resting on her lap. Every few minutes he would look up at her face, then at Marcus, as if asking, "Is she going to be okay?" "Good boy," Marcus murmured. "Keep her warm." By 3 a.m., Harold's breathing had stabilized. By 4 a.m., his fever had broken. By 5 a.m., the storm had finally begun to ease, and Eleanor had stopped shivering long enough to speak. "My name is Eleanor Bennett," she said, her voice still trembling. "That's my husband, Harold. We've been married 52 years. Marcus sat across from her, the blood-stained envelope on the table between them. He hadn't opened it. Something told him that once he did, there would be no going back. "What happened to you?" he asked. Eleanor's hands tightened around the mug of hot water he had given her. Shadow whined softly, sensing her distress. "We had a ranch," she began. "Down in White Pine Valley. Been in Harold's family for 4 generations. 100 acres of the most beautiful land you've ever seen. And underneath it..." She paused, her jaw tightening. "Underneath it is water. Pure, clean groundwater. An aquifer, they call it. One of the largest in the state." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen this before. Not here, not in Montana, but in other places, other countries. Wherever there was something valuable in the ground, there were people willing to kill for it. "A company came to us 3 years ago," Eleanor continued. "Northern Peak Mining Corp. They wanted to buy our land, offered us a lot of money. But we said no. That land is everything. Our parents are buried there. Our memories are there. Our son grew up there." Her voice broke on the last word. "Jake," she whispered. "Our boy, Jake." Marcus waited. He had learned long ago that grief needed space. You couldn't rush it. You couldn't force it. You just had to sit with it and let it breathe. "Jake was a Marine," Eleanor said, a fragile pride entering her voice. "Served 2 tours overseas. Came home and said he was done with violence. He wanted to live peacefully, raise his kids on the land his grandfather built. He had 2 little ones, Emma and Noah, 8 and 6. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "When Northern Peak kept pressuring us, Jake started asking questions. He was always like that, couldn't leave a puzzle unsolved. He found out they weren't just after our water. They were already taking it, illegally, pumping it out through underground channels, contaminating what was left with chemicals from their mining operations. And anyone who complained... She stopped. Her face went pale. Anyone who complained, Marcus prompted gently. They disappeared, Eleanor whispered. Or had accidents. Car crashes, house fires, hunting accidents. 12 people in 5 years, 12 people who spoke up against Northern Peak, all dead. Marcus felt his hands curl into fists. Jake compiled evidence, Eleanor continued. He was careful, quiet. He didn't trust anyone. But somehow they found out. What happened to him? Eleanor's composure finally shattered. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. They called it a hunting accident. Said he shot himself cleaning his rifle. But Jake never made mistakes like that. He was trained. He was careful. And the night before he died, he called us. He said he had proof that could bring down the whole company. He said if anything happened to him, we needed to get the evidence and run. She looked at the blood-stained envelope on the table. That envelope, that's what Jake died for. Marcus stared at it. His reflection stared back from the glossy surface of the blood. And tonight, he asked, what happened tonight? Eleanor's jaw clenched. They came for us. Sheriff Webb and his men. They burned our house, killed our cattle. Harold tried to fight them, but... She gestured helplessly at her unconscious husband. He's 78 years old. What could he do against guns? How did you escape? Harold knew the mountains, knew trails nobody else remembered. We ran. For hours we ran. The storm was the only thing that saved us. They couldn't track us through the blizzard, but we would have died out there if we hadn't found your cabin. She looked at Marcus with eyes that held no hope left, only exhaustion and a desperate flickering trust. I don't know who you are, she said. I don't know why you're living alone on this mountain, but you're the only chance we have. Please, please help us. For Jake. For the grandchildren who will never see their father again. Please. Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. He thought about the life he had built up here. The isolation. The quiet. The careful distance he had maintained from anything that might make him feel again. He had come to Grizzly Ridge to disappear. To escape the guilt of Danny Cruz's death. To stop being responsible for anyone but himself. But then he looked at Eleanor. At her trembling hands. At the quiet courage that had carried her through a blizzard that should have killed her. And he looked at Shadow. The dog met his gaze steadily. No judgment, no expectation, just readiness, just loyalty, just a silent question. What are we going to do? Marcus reached across the table and picked up the envelope. Tell me everything, he said. The evidence was damning. Inside the envelope were photographs, documents, and a damaged cell phone. The photographs showed Northern Peak trucks at locations they shouldn't have been on private property near water sources, dumping barrels of unmarked chemicals into the ground at night. The documents were financial records, some of them internal memos showing payments to Sheriff Carter Webb and 3 county commissioners. But the cell phone was the most valuable piece. Marcus held it carefully, examining the cracked screen. Does this work? Eleanor nodded. Jake rigged it, said even if they destroyed it, the data was backed up somewhere safe. He was always good with technology, better than us anyway. Marcus pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, displaying a single audio file. Jake recorded this the night before he died, Eleanor whispered. We've listened to it 100 times, but we couldn't do anything. We didn't know who to trust. Marcus hit play. A young man's voice filled the cabin, clear, steady, but with an undercurrent of fear. If you're listening to this, something has happened to me. My name is Jake Bennett. I'm a former Marine currently living in White Pine Valley, Montana. For the past 8 months, I've been investigating Northern Peak Mining Corp. And their CEO, Victor Harlan. Marcus felt Shadow tense beside him. The dog's ears were forward, listening. I have evidence that Northern Peak has been illegally extracting groundwater from private properties throughout the valley, contaminating the aquifer with toxic chemicals, and systematically eliminating anyone who threatens to expose them. I have documented 12 suspicious deaths over the past 5 years, all opponents of Northern Peak, all ruled accidents or suicides. Jake's voice grew harder. Sheriff Carter Webb is on their payroll. So are Judge Morrison and 3 county commissioners. But the real power is Victor Harlan. He has connections in the state government, maybe higher. He's been doing this for years and nobody has stopped him because nobody can prove it. A pause. When Jake spoke again, his voice was quieter, more personal. Mom, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. But please, whatever you do, don't let them win. Take this evidence and run. Find someone you can trust, someone who can't be bought, someone who has nothing left to lose. The recording ended. Marcus sat frozen. Someone who has nothing left to lose. He thought about Danny, about the mission in Afghanistan, about the 1 second of hesitation that had cost his best friend everything. He thought about the 2 years he had spent on this mountain hiding from the world, hiding from himself, hiding from the weight of a guilt that never got lighter. And he thought about Jake Bennett, a Marine, a father, a man who had died trying to do the right thing. Victor Harlan, Marcus said slowly. I know that name. Eleanor looked at him sharply. You do. He was a military contractor, supplied equipment to special operations units overseas. Marcus's jaw tightened. My unit used his gear. The memory surfaced unbidden. A night mission in Syria, faulty equipment, a radio that failed at the worst possible moment. Danny running toward him shouting something Marcus couldn't hear. The explosion that came from nowhere. His equipment was defective, Marcus said quietly. People died because of it. But nothing ever happened. The reports were buried. The investigations went nowhere. Eleanor stared at him. You were in the Navy, SEALs, 12 years. And you came here because... Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. Eleanor read the truth in his eyes. You lost someone, she said softly. Someone close. My best friend. The words felt like broken glass in his throat. He died because I hesitated. 1 second. That's all it took. 1 second and he was gone. Eleanor reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I know that guilt, she said. I see it in Harold's eyes every day. He blames himself for Jake. Says he should have stopped him. Should have kept him safe. Her grip tightened. But guilt doesn't help the dead. It only poisons the living. Marcus pulled his hand away gently. You should rest, he said. Harold needs to recover. In the morning we'll figure out our next move. Eleanor nodded, exhaustion finally overtaking her. She leaned back against Shadow, who had positioned himself as a living pillow. Within minutes, her breathing had slowed into sleep. But Marcus didn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the storm die down, watching the first gray light of dawn creep over the mountains. And he thought about what Jake Bennett had said. Find someone who has nothing left to lose. The SUV appeared at noon. Shadow noticed at first a distant rumble that didn't belong to the wind or the settling snow. The dog's head snapped toward the window, a low growl building in his chest. Marcus was beside him instantly. Through the frost-covered glass, he saw it a black SUV with tinted windows moving slowly up the ridge road. It stopped about a quarter-mile from the cabin. Engine running. Waiting. "They found us," Eleanor said behind him. Her voice was steady, but Marcus heard the terror underneath. "Stay with Harold," Marcus ordered. "Keep away from the windows." He moved to his emergency cache, a locked chest beneath the floorboards. Inside were supplies he had hoped never to need again. A tactical vest, night vision goggles, a secure satellite phone, and the Sig Sauer P226 he had carried through 3 combat deployments. The weight of the pistol in his hand felt like coming home. He hated that feeling. "If anything happens to me," he said without turning around, "there's a root cellar under the cabin. Entrance is beneath the bear rug near the back wall. It's stocked with supplies. You can survive down there for weeks if you have to." "And what are you going to do?" Marcus finally looked at her. "What I was trained to do." He opened the door and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a physical blow, but he barely noticed. His focus was on the SUV. 2 figures visible through the tinted windshield. Engine still running. No movement. Shadow appeared beside him, silent as a ghost. "Easy," Marcus murmured. "Not yet." They stood there for a full minute. 2 minutes. 3. Then the SUV's reverse lights flashed. The vehicle began backing down the ridge road slowly at first, then faster until it disappeared around a bend. Marcus didn't relax. This wasn't retreat. This was reconnaissance. They were confirming the location, counting occupants, planning their approach. They would be back. And when they came, it wouldn't be with one vehicle. Marcus returned to the cabin. Eleanor was standing exactly where he had left her, her face pale but determined. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Hours, maybe less. They know we're here. They'll want to hit us before we can move Harold." "Then what do we do?" Marcus looked at Harold still unconscious on the cot, at Eleanor 73 years old, and refusing to break, at Shadow, waiting for a command. "We prepare," he said. The next 4 hours were a masterclass in survival. Marcus transformed the cabin into a defensive position. He blocked sight lines from the windows, created multiple exit routes, and set up early warning systems using fishing line and tin cans. He showed Eleanor how to use the root cellar, how to barricade the entrance, how to stay silent no matter what she heard above. "If they breach the cabin," he told her, "you don't come up. No matter what. You wait until either I come for you or 24 hours pass. If I don't come back, there's a satellite phone in the cellar. The number programmed into it belongs to someone I trust. Her name is Rachel Torres. She's FBI. Tell her everything." Eleanor's eyes glistened. "You've done this before." "Too many times." "And the people you protected? What happened to them?" Marcus didn't answer. Eleanor touched his arm. "You're not the same man who hesitated before. I can see it. Whatever happened to your friend? It wasn't because you were weak. It was because you were human. Being human got him killed." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "Being human kept you alive. And right now, that's what we need. We don't need a machine. We need someone who cares enough to fight." Before Marcus could respond, Shadow barked. A sharp, urgent sound. Marcus spun toward the window. 3 vehicles were approaching. 3 black SUVs moving in formation up the ridge road. "Get Harold into the cellar," Marcus commanded. "Now!" Eleanor didn't hesitate. With strength born of desperation, she dragged her husband from the cot and pulled him toward the back of the cabin. Marcus helped lower both of them into the root cellar, then replaced the bear rug and the floorboards. "Remember what I said," he told her through the narrow gap. 24 hours. Rachel Torres. Marcus. Eleanor's voice stopped him. Thank you. For everything. He sealed the cellar. Then he turned to face the window, where the SUVs were pulling to a stop. Shadow stood beside him, muscles coiled, teeth bared. You ready? Marcus asked. The dog's growl was all the answer he needed. 12 men emerged from the vehicles. Marcus counted them through a crack in the boarded window. 12 men, tactical gear, automatic weapons, ex-military based on their movement patterns. Professional, disciplined, dangerous. And leading them was a man Marcus recognized from the photographs in Jake's envelope. Sheriff Carter Webb. Webb was in his early 50s, thick-necked and broad-shouldered, with a reddish mustache and the swagger of a man who had never faced real consequences. He wore a sheriff's badge, but his bearing was all wrong, too aggressive, too confident, too predatory. Marcus Stone. Webb's voice boomed across the snowy clearing. I know you're in there. I know who you are. Navy SEAL, 12 years, honorable discharge, decorated, respected, the kind of man people trust. He paused, letting the words hang. But you're also the kind of man who makes mistakes, who gets people killed. Danny Cruz, right? That was your friend's name, the one who died because you hesitated. Marcus felt his jaw clench. You've got something that belongs to me, Webb continued. An old couple, some documents. Hand them over and you can go back to hiding on this mountain. Nobody needs to get hurt. Shadow's growl intensified. But if you make me come in there... Webb drew his sidearm. Well, let's just say accidents happen, especially during blizzards, especially to people who stick their noses where they don't belong. Marcus took a slow breath. He thought about Danny. He thought about Jake Bennett. He thought about Harold and Eleanor huddled in the darkness beneath his feet, trusting him with their lives. And he made a decision. Shadow, he said quietly. Positions. The dog vanished into the shadows. Marcus picked up his rifle. And when Sheriff Webb ordered his men to advance, Marcus Stone stopped hiding. The first man through the door didn't see Shadow. He saw the empty cabin. He saw the overturned furniture. He saw the wood stove still glowing with dying embers. What he didn't see was the 70-pound German Shepherd launching from the shadows like a guided missile. Shadow hit him square in the chest. The man went down hard, his rifle clattering across the floor, his scream cut short as the dog's jaws clamped around his forearm. Contact left, someone shouted from outside. Marcus was already moving. He came through the side window glass, exploding around him, and caught the second man with a chokehold before he could raise his weapon. 3 seconds of pressure to the carotid. The man's eyes rolled back. He dropped. 2 down, Marcus muttered. 10 to go. A burst of automatic fire shredded the cabin wall. Marcus rolled behind the woodpile he had positioned earlier, using it as cover. Bullets splintered the logs inches from his head. Stone! Webb's voice was furious now. You just made the worst mistake of your life. Marcus didn't respond. He was counting. Counting muzzle flashes. Counting positions. Counting the seconds between trigger pulls. 8 men had spread out, 2 covering the front, 2 on each flank, 2 more circling toward the back. They were good. But Marcus had trained better men than these, and buried them. He whistled twice. Short. Sharp. Shadow released his first victim and vanished beneath the cabin through a gap Marcus had widened that morning. The dog knew the plan. They had run variations of it a dozen times overseas. Distract. Divide. Destroy. The men on the east flank heard movement beneath them. One of them panicked, firing blindly at the ground. What the hell was that? Something's under there! Shadow burst from the snow behind them. The first man went down screaming the dog's teeth, sinking into his calf. The second spun to help his partner and caught Marcus's rifle butt across the jaw. He crumpled. 4 down, 8 to go. "Fall back," someone yelled. "Fall back to the vehicles." But Webb wasn't retreating. Marcus could see him through the chaos, standing near the lead SUV, face twisted with rage, barking orders into a radio. "I need backup. Now he's military trained. Send everyone—" Marcus felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Webb was scared. Good. Scared men made mistakes. He grabbed the fallen man's radio and keyed the mic. "Webb." Silence. Then, "Stone, you think this changes anything? I think you're down 4 men in 90 seconds. I think your backup is 20 minutes away. And I think you're starting to realize you picked the wrong cabin." Webb's laugh was ugly. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't some local dispute. This is bigger than you. Bigger than those 2 old fools hiding in your basement." Marcus's grip tightened on the radio. "How do you know about the basement?" A pause. When Webb spoke again, his voice dripped with triumph. "You really think I came up here blind? We've had eyes on this ridge for months. We know about your little hideout, your supplies, your panic room." Another laugh. "We even know about your dead friend. Danny Cruz-Wright died in Syria because you froze. Must be hard carrying that around." Marcus felt something snap inside him. "You want to talk about carrying things?" His voice was ice. "Let's talk about the 12 people you murdered. Let's talk about Jake Bennett. Let's talk about how you burned an old couple out of their home because they wouldn't sell their water. Those are serious accusations. I have proof. Jake's recordings, the financial documents, the photographs of your men dumping chemicals at night." Marcus let that sink in. "How do you think your bosses will react when that evidence hits the FBI?" The radio went silent for a long moment. When Webb spoke again, all the bravado was gone. "What do you want?" "I want you to leave. And if I don't—" Marcus looked at Shadow standing alert beside him, blood on his muzzle. He looked at the 4 unconscious men scattered across the snow. He thought about Eleanor and Harold huddled in the darkness below, trusting him with their lives. "Then I'll do what I was trained to do," Marcus said quietly. "And you'll find out why they called my unit the Reapers." Another silence. This one longer. Then Webb's voice tight with barely controlled fury. "This isn't over, Stone. Not even close." The SUV's engines roared to life. One by one they pulled away, leaving their fallen men behind. Marcus watched them go. He knew Webb was right. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Eleanor's face, when she emerged from the cellar, told Marcus everything he needed to know about what she had heard. "You fought them," she whispered. "All of them." "Not all. Just enough." Harold was awake now, propped against the cellar wall, his face pale, but his eyes sharp. The old man had the look of someone who had been in combat, not surprised by violence, only weighing its implications. "How many?" Harold asked. 12 came, 4 went down, 8 retreated with Webb. He'll be back." "I know." Harold studied Marcus for a long moment. "You weren't just a SEAL, were you? Regular teams don't fight like that." Marcus said nothing. "Special warfare. Tier 1. Harold nodded slowly. "I recognize the look. My brother had it. Korea. Came back different. Never talked about what he did over there, but you could see it in his eyes. Same eyes you've got." Eleanor helped her husband to his feet. "We heard what you said on the radio. About the evidence. About the FBI. I have a contact. Rachel Torres. She's with the Environmental Crimes Division. If we can get Jake's evidence to her, she can bring federal resources." "And you trust her?" Marcus hesitated. Trust was a word he had learned to use carefully. In his world, trust got people killed. I trust that she wants to take down men like Webb. Our goals align. For now, that's enough." Harold shook his head. "It's not that simple, son." Something in his tone made Marcus pause. "What do you mean?" Harold exchanged a glance with Eleanor. The look that passed between them was heavy with decades of shared secrets. "Jake didn't just compile evidence," Harold said slowly. "He traced the money. All of it. Northern Peak isn't just some mining company. It's a front." "A front for what?" That's what Jake was trying to figure out when they killed him. Harold's jaw tightened. "But he found enough to know the operation goes way beyond Montana. 5 states, maybe more. Politicians, judges, federal officials, all on the payroll." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "You're telling me this thing reaches into the federal government? I'm telling you to be careful who you call." Harold's eyes bored into his. Jake trusted someone. Someone he thought was clean. That's how they found him. Someone close to the investigation leaked his location. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "You're saying there's a mole?" "I'm saying Jake made one phone call to someone he trusted, and 12 hours later he was dead." Harold's voice cracked. "My son wasn't careless. He wasn't sloppy. Someone betrayed him." Marcus looked at the satellite phone in his hand. Rachel Torres's number was programmed into speed dial. Could he trust her? Could he trust anyone? The answer came 3 hours later, and it came from an unexpected source. Marcus was sorting through Jake's documents when Shadow's ears pricked up. The dog trotted to the window tail, low hackles raised but not in aggression, in recognition. "Someone's coming," Marcus said. "Someone the Shadow knows." He grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Through the frost-covered glass, he saw a figure approaching on foot. Alone. Hands raised. "Don't shoot." The voice was female. Familiar. "Marcus, it's me." He opened the door slowly, keeping his weapon ready. Rachel Torres stood in the snow. She was exactly as he remembered, late 30s sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore civilian clothes beneath a heavy winter coat, and her badge was nowhere in sight. "How the hell did you find me?" Marcus demanded. "You activated your emergency beacon 6 hours ago. Remember back when you were preparing for Webb's assault?" She took a careful step forward. "I've been monitoring that frequency since you dropped off the grid 2 years ago. You said you'd only contact me if there was something big enough to pull you back in." Rachel's eyes were intense. "Marcus, this is bigger than you know. Bigger than the Bennetts. Bigger than Webb. I've been building a case against Northern Peak for 18 months, and Jake Bennett's evidence is the missing piece." Marcus didn't lower his rifle. "How do I know you're not the leak?" Rachel flinched. "What?" Jake made one call before he died. One call to someone he trusted. 12 hours later, he was murdered. Harold thinks there's a mole in the investigation. For a moment, Rachel said nothing. Then slowly she reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Jake didn't call me," she said quietly. "He called my partner, Agent David Chen." She handed Marcus the paper. It was a printout of phone records. One call made from Jake Bennett's cell phone to a number Marcus didn't recognize. "Chen took the call," Rachel continued. "He told me it was a dead end. A crackpot with conspiracy theories. I believed him. I trusted him." Her voice hardened. 3 months ago, I started noticing discrepancies. Evidence that went missing. Witnesses who changed their stories. I started digging. And Chen's been taking payments from a shell company linked to Northern Peak. $200,000 over the past 3 years. Rachel's jaw tightened. He's the mole, Marcus, and when he finds out I'm here, he'll know I'm on to him. Marcus studied her face, looking for deception, looking for the tell that would reveal her as another player in Webb's game. He found nothing but exhaustion and rage and the cold determination of someone who had watched injustice win too many times. He lowered his rifle. "You'd better come inside." Harold didn't trust her. Marcus could see it in the old man's eyes, the way they narrowed when Rachel spoke, the way his hands clenched whenever she mentioned the FBI. 50 years of hard living had taught Harold Bennett to read people, and right now he was reading Rachel Torres with deep suspicion. "You're asking us to believe that you drove up here alone in the middle of winter without backup to help 3 strangers you've never met?" Harold's voice was flat. "Why?" Rachel met his gaze without flinching. "Because your son died for this evidence, Mr. Bennett. And because I've spent 18 months watching guilty men walk free while innocent people suffer. I'm tired of it. Pretty words. They're the truth. The last person who told us the truth was Jake, and they killed him for it." Eleanor placed a hand on her husband's arm. "Harold." "No." Harold pulled away. "I've buried my son. I've lost my home. I've watched everything we built turn to ash. I will not hand over Jake's evidence to another stranger who makes promises she can't keep." Rachel's expression softened. "Mr. Bennett, I understand your fear. I do. But I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust the evidence. Jake was smart. He built redundancies, backups, dead drops. Even if something happens to me, his work will survive." "How can you know that?" "Because I found one of his backups 3 months ago. A safety deposit box in Billings registered under a fake name. Inside was a hard drive with partial copies of everything enough to prove the conspiracy exists, but not enough to bring charges." Rachel looked at the blood-stained envelope on the table. "What you have is the rest. The smoking gun. Phone recordings, financial trails, murder evidence. Combined with what I already have, it's enough to bring down not just Webb and Harlan, but everyone connected to them." Harold was silent for a long moment. His weathered face showed nothing, but Marcus could see the war happening behind his eyes. Finally, the old man spoke. "There's something you need to know. Something that isn't in any of those documents." Rachel leaned forward. "What?" Harold looked at Eleanor. She nodded slowly. "Jake told us something before he died. Something he was too scared to put in writing." Harold's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He said the money trail didn't stop at Northern Peak. It went higher. Much higher." "How high?" Harold's eyes met Rachel's. "He said the name, one name. A name so powerful that speaking it out loud was enough to get you killed." The cabin fell silent. "Who?" Rachel pressed. Harold shook his head. "I won't say it. Not yet. Not until I know we're safe." He looked at Marcus. "You get us off this mountain. You get us somewhere they can't reach. Then I'll tell you everything." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we move tonight." Leaving the cabin was the hardest thing Marcus had done in 2 years. Not because of the danger he had faced worse odds with worse resources. Not because of the cold he had operated in conditions that would kill most men in hours. But because the cabin had become his sanctuary. His hiding place. The only spot on Earth where the ghosts couldn't find him. Now, he was leaving it behind. Shadow seemed to sense his hesitation. The dog pressed against his leg, a warm, solid presence that said, "I'm here. Whatever comes next, I'm here." "Thank you," Marcus murmured, "for everything." Shadow's tail wagged once. They moved out at midnight. Marcus had mapped 3 escape routes when he first arrived on Grizzly Ridge. Route 1 followed the main road fastest but most exposed. Route 2 cut through national forest, good cover but treacherous terrain. Route 3 dropped into an abandoned mining network, invisible from above, but easy to get lost in. He chose Route 3. The mine entrance was hidden behind a waterfall that had frozen solid. Marcus led the way with a flashlight shadow at his side. Harold and Eleanor following close behind Rachel, bringing up the rear. The tunnels were older than Montana statehood, carved by prospectors chasing silver dreams that had turned to dust decades ago. Marcus had explored them his first month on the ridge, memorizing the layout, noting the exits, preparing for a day he hoped would never come. That day had come. They walked in silence for almost an hour. The only sounds were their footsteps, their breathing, and the occasional drip of water from the frozen ceiling. Then Shadow stopped. The dog's hackles rose. A low growl built in his throat. "What is it?" Eleanor whispered. Marcus raised a hand for silence. He killed his flashlight. Darkness swallowed them whole, and in that darkness Marcus heard what Shadow had already detected. Footsteps. Distant, but approaching. Multiple sets moving with military precision. "They're in the tunnels," Rachel breathed. "How is that possible?" Marcus's mind raced. Webb couldn't have known about this route. He couldn't have found the entrance in the dark, unless someone had told him, unless there was another mole, unless Rachel Torres wasn't who she claimed to be. Marcus's hand moved to his sidearm. "Rachel. What? Who else knew you were coming here tonight?" A pause. Too long. No one. "You're lying." "Marcus, I swear, who else knew?" The footsteps were getting closer now. Flashlight beams flickered in the distance. Rachel's voice shook. "I had to file a report. Standard procedure when pursuing a lead outside my jurisdiction. It went through Chen's office." "Chen? The mole? I didn't know he would—" "Quiet." Marcus pulled Harold and Eleanor against the tunnel wall. In the darkness he could feel the old man's heart pounding. Eleanor's hand found his and squeezed tight. The footsteps passed an intersection 20 feet ahead. "Spread out," a voice commanded. "Check every branch. They can't have gone far." Marcus counted the beams. 6, maybe 7. Armed men hunting them through underground darkness. And they were getting closer. He had maybe 2 minutes to make a choice. Fight, and risk the Bennetts getting caught in crossfire. Run, and risk getting lost in tunnels that stretched for miles. Or, his hand found a crack in the wall. A gap barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. He had noticed it on his first exploration, a natural fissure that led to a parallel shaft. "This way," he breathed. "Single file. Don't make a sound." He pushed Eleanor through first, then Harold. Rachel hesitated. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" "Later. Move." She squeezed through the gap. Marcus followed, pulling Shadow after him. They emerged into a narrow shaft barely high enough to crouch. The air was stale thick with the smell of ancient rock and forgotten things. Behind them, the footsteps continued past. The voices faded. They had bought themselves time. But Marcus knew it wouldn't last. Webb was hunting them. Chen was feeding him information. And somewhere in the darkness, the truth about Jake Bennett's murder and the powerful name Harold refused to speak was waiting to be found. Marcus looked at the 3 people huddled in the darkness beside him. An old couple who had lost everything. An FBI agent who might be compromised. A dog who had never let him down. And himself. A broken soldier looking for redemption. "We keep moving," he said quietly. "We don't stop until we're clear." No one argued. They crawled deeper into the mountain, the weight of secrets pressing down on them like the stone itself. And somewhere above, Webb's voice crackled over a radio, "Find them. I don't care what it takes. Find them and finish this." The secondary exit dumped them into a ravine 3 miles from where they had started. Marcus checked his watch. Almost 4 a.m. They had been underground for 4 hours. Harold was flagging badly, his wound seeping through the bandages. Eleanor looked ready to collapse. Even Rachel moved with the sluggish steps of someone running on empty. Only Shadow remained alert. The dog's eyes swept the darkness constantly, ears rotating toward every sound. "We need to rest," Rachel said. "Not yet. We're still too close." "Harold can't go much further." Marcus looked at the old man. Harold Bennett's face was gray, his breathing shallow, but his eyes still held that stubborn fire. "I can make it," Harold grunted. "Don't you dare stop on my account." "Harold, my son died for this. I won't let his sacrifice mean nothing because I couldn't walk another mile." Eleanor took her husband's arm. "Then lean on me, like you've done for 52 years. Something passed between them. A look, a lifetime of shared struggle, compressed into a single glance. Harold nodded. They kept moving, another hour, another mile. The terrain grew rougher, the temperature dropping as they climbed toward a ridge Marcus had identified months ago as an emergency extraction point. At 5:15 a.m., they reached it. The ridge overlooked a valley that stretched toward White Pine. In the distance, Marcus could see the lights of the town just beginning to flicker awake. Civilization. Safety. So close, but still impossibly far. "Now what?" Rachel asked. Marcus pulled out his satellite phone. "Now I make a call I hoped I'd never have to make." "To who?" He didn't answer. He dialed a number from memory and waited. 3 rings. 4. 5. Then a voice, rough with sleep, but instantly alert. "Stone, is that you?" "Hey, Reaper, I need a favor." A long pause. When the voice spoke again, it was careful, measured. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet, but I might be soon if you don't help me." Another pause. Then, "What do you need?" "Extraction. 4 people, 1 dog. Somewhere safe. Somewhere even the feds can't reach." "That's a big ask." "I know. But I've got evidence that could bring down a senator, 3 judges, and half the state government of Montana. The people after us have resources connections and 0 hesitation about killing anyone who gets in their way." A low whistle. "You really know how to pick your battles, Stone. Will you help?" The silence stretched for an eternity. Then, "Send me your coordinates. I'll have a bird there by dawn." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Thanks, Reaper. I owe you." "Yeah, you do. And I'm going to collect." A pause. "It's good to hear your voice, brother. We thought we'd lost you." "You almost did." He ended the call. Rachel was staring at him. "Who was that?" "Someone I served with. Someone I trust." "You said you don't trust anyone." Marcus looked at her. At Harold and Eleanor huddled together against the cold. At Shadow standing guard in the first light of dawn. "I'm learning," he said quietly. The helicopter appeared at 6:47 a.m. It came from the east, flying low-painted black with no visible markings. Military hardware repurposed for private use, the kind of aircraft that didn't officially exist. It touched down on the ridge in a storm of snow and rotor wash. A man jumped out, big, broad-shouldered with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. He wore tactical gear and moved with the coiled energy of a predator. "Stone," he said, clasping Marcus's hand. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too. Thanks for coming, Reaper." "Thank me when we're clear." He looked at the others. "These our packages. Harold and Eleanor Bennett. Rachel Torres, FBI. And this is Shadow." Reaper's eyes lingered on the dog. "Good to see you, boy. Been a while." Shadow's tail wagged. "You know each other?" Eleanor asked. "Shadow was part of our unit," Marcus explained. "He saved Reaper's life twice in Afghanistan." "3 times," Reaper corrected. "But who's counting?" He gestured toward the helicopter. "We need to move. Webb's got birds in the air, and they're sweeping the mountains." They boarded quickly. Harold needed help climbing in, but once he was seated, some of the tension left his face. Eleanor sat beside him, holding his hand, looking out the window at the mountains that had nearly killed them. Rachel strapped in across from Marcus. "Where are we going? Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting until we're on the ground." The helicopter lifted off. The ridge fell away beneath them. Grizzly Ridge shrank to a speck, then disappeared entirely. Marcus watched it go. 2 years of hiding. 2 years of running from himself. All of it left behind in a matter of seconds. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know if they would survive the week. But for the first time since Danny Cruz died in his arms, Marcus Stone felt something that might have been hope. Beside him, Shadow rested his head on Marcus's knee, and somewhere below, Sheriff Carter Webb stood in the snow, watching the helicopter disappear, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over, Stone," he muttered into the wind. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Harlan, we have a problem." The helicopter touched down on a ranch 60 miles southeast of White Pine Valley. Marcus recognized the property immediately. It belonged to a retired Delta Force operator named Thomas Reaper Hendricks, a man who had built his post-military life around one simple principle: never owe anyone anything, and never leave a brother behind. The main house was fortified without looking fortified. Reinforced walls hidden behind rustic siding, bulletproof glass disguised as ordinary windows, a basement that doubled as a command center with enough communications equipment to coordinate a small war. "Welcome to Castle Hendricks," Reaper said as they climbed out of the helicopter. "It's not pretty, but it's safe. Webb's people won't find you here." Harold stumbled on the landing. Eleanor caught him, but Marcus could see the old man's strength failing. "He needs a doctor," Eleanor said, her voice tight with fear. "Already called one. Ex-Army medic lives 20 minutes north. She'll be here within the hour." Reaper looked at Marcus. "Let's get everyone inside. Then you and I need to talk." They settled Harold on a couch in the main room. Eleanor refused to leave his side, holding his hand, whispering words meant only for him. Rachel stood by the window, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Shadow positioned himself between the door and the Bennetts. Guardian mode. He wouldn't move until Marcus told him it was safe. "Good boy," Marcus murmured. "Watch them." He followed Reaper into the basement. The command center was exactly what Marcus expected. Multiple screens showing satellite feeds, radio equipment, weapons, cash, maps covering every wall. Reaper had spent 20 years preparing for scenarios most people couldn't imagine. "Talk to me," Reaper said, closing the door behind them. Marcus gave him everything. The Bennetts, Jake's evidence, Northern Peak, Sheriff Webb, the mole in the FBI, the 12 murders disguised as accidents, the contaminated water supply. Everything except the name Harold still refused to speak. When he finished, Reaper let out a long breath. "You really stepped in it this time, Stone." "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice. You could have sent them away. could have stayed in your cabin and pretended you never heard that knock. Reaper's eyes were steady. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Why? Marcus thought about the question. He thought about Danny Cruz bleeding out in his arms. He thought about the 2 years of silence on Grizzly Ridge. He thought about Eleanor's face when she begged him for help. Because I was tired of hiding, he said finally. And because they deserved someone who would fight for them. Reaper nodded slowly. Danny would be proud. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud by anyone but himself in 2 years. You knew him, Marcus said quietly. Served with him before he joined your unit. Good man. Best I ever knew. Reaper paused. His death wasn't your fault, Stone. I've read the reports. That mission was compromised from the start. Faulty intel, defective equipment. You did everything right. I hesitated. For 1 second. 1. And in that second you were processing information that would have frozen most men completely. Danny didn't die because you hesitated. He died because someone in the supply chain sent your unit into hostile territory with equipment that failed when it mattered most. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall he had built around that memory. The equipment came from Northern Peak, he said slowly, from Victor Harlan's company. Reaper's expression hardened. Are you sure? I've suspected for 2 years. Jake Bennett's evidence confirms it. Harlan supplied our unit with defective gear, then buried the reports when it got people killed. Marcus's voice was ice. Danny's death is connected to all of this. I just didn't see it until now. Then this isn't just about the Bennetts anymore. No, it's personal. Reaper was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to one of the screens and pulled up a satellite image. Victor Harlan isn't just some mining executive. He's connected to people at the highest levels, senators, Pentagon officials, intelligence community. He zoomed in on a compound surrounded by security fencing. This is his estate outside Helena. Private security, surveillance systems, the works. If he knows you have Jake's evidence, he'll come for you with everything he's got. Let him come? Marcus, I'm done running Reaper. I've been running for 2 years, and all it did was let men like Harlan keep killing innocent people. Marcus's jaw tightened. Harold knows something. A name. Someone powerful enough that Jake was afraid to put it in writing. I need to find out who it is. And then I finish this. The medic arrived 45 minutes later. Her name was Sarah Chen, no relation to the FBI mole, and she had spent 15 years patching up soldiers in combat zones before retiring to rural Montana. She was efficient professional and asked no questions about why an elderly man with a knife wound was lying on a couch in Thomas Hendricks's living room. The wound is infected, she said after examining Harold. He needs antibiotics and rest, a lot of rest. She looked at Eleanor. Has he been running on adrenaline? We walked through a blizzard for 6 hours, then escaped through mine tunnels, then flew here in a helicopter. Sarah's eyebrows rose. That explains it. His body is shutting down from exhaustion. I can stabilize him, but he needs to stay still for at least 48 hours. We might not have 48 hours, Marcus said. Then he might not survive. Sarah's voice was blunt. I'm telling you what his body needs. What you do with that information is your choice. As she administered antibiotics, cleaned the wound properly, and left instructions for his care. Eleanor listened to every word, memorizing the details with the focus of a woman who had been keeping her husband alive through sheer willpower. When Sarah left, Harold's eyes opened. I heard everything, he said weakly. Don't you dare slow down on my account. Harold, listen to me. The old man's hand found Marcus's arm. His grip was weaker than before, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. Jake died trying to expose these people. I won't let his sacrifice mean nothing because I needed a nap. You need more than a nap. I need to tell you the name." Harold's voice dropped to a whisper. "Before it's too late." The room went silent. Eleanor moved closer. Rachel stepped away from the window. Even Shadow lifted his head, sensing the shift in energy. "You sure?" Marcus asked. "I should have told you from the beginning, but I was afraid. Afraid that saying it out loud would make it real, would make it impossible to take back." Harold's breathing was labored. Jake found documents linking Northern Peak to a political action committee. The PAC funded campaigns across 5 states, governors, senators, judges, all of them connected to the same source. "Who?" Harold closed his eyes. "Senator William Crawford." The name hit the room like a bomb. Rachel's face went pale. "Crawford, the Senate Majority Leader." Jake traced the money. Every dollar that went to Northern Peak, every bribe that went to Webb, every payment that went to the judges who dismissed environmental complaints, it all flowed through Crawford's network. Harold's voice shook. "He's not just connected to the conspiracy. He's running it." Marcus felt the weight of the revelation settle over him. Senator William Crawford was one of the most powerful men in Washington, a 3-term senator with presidential ambitions, a man who appeared on Sunday talk shows advocating for environmental protection while secretly profiting from the destruction of Montana's water supply. "If this is true," Rachel said slowly, "we're not just fighting a mining company. We're fighting someone with the resources of the United States government behind him." "It's true." Harold opened his eyes. Jake had proof. A recording. Crawford on the phone with Harlan discussing how to handle the Bennett problem. My son recorded a sitting senator ordering his murder. "Where's the recording?" "Hidden." Jake was paranoid by the end. He didn't trust digital storage. He made a physical copy and hid it somewhere only family would know to look. "Where?" Marcus pressed. Harold looked at Eleanor. Something passed between them, a lifetime of shared memories, shared secrets, shared love. "Our ranch," Eleanor said quietly. "Jake buried it under the old oak tree, the one he used to climb as a boy. He told us if anything happened to him, we should dig there and find what he left behind." "The ranch was burned," Rachel said. "Webb's men destroyed it. They burned the house, the barn, but they didn't touch the oak tree." Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "It's still standing. I know it is." Marcus looked at Reaper. "Can you get me there?" "The ranch is in the middle of enemy territory. Webb has men watching it around the clock. If you go in, I'm not asking if it's safe, I'm asking if you can get me there." Reaper was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I can get you close. After that, you're on your own. That's all I need." Eleanor stood. "I'm coming with you." "No. That's my land. My son's grave is there. I know every inch of that property in ways you never could." Her chin lifted. "I'm coming. Eleanor, if something happens to you, then I'll die on the land my family built. There are worse ways to go." She looked at her husband. "Harold can't travel, but I can, and I won't let you do this alone." Marcus wanted to argue. Every instinct told him to leave her here where she was safe. But he saw something in Eleanor's eyes that he recognized. The same determination he had seen in Danny's eyes. The same refusal to stand aside while others fought. "Fine," he said, "but you follow my lead. No arguments, no heroics." "I'm 73 years old. I'm well past heroics." A ghost of a smile crossed her weathered face. "But I'm not past fighting for my family." They left at midnight. Reaper drove them in a nondescript pickup truck taking back roads that didn't appear on any GPS system. Shadow sat in the truck bed, ears alert, watching the darkness scroll past. Rachel stayed behind with Harold. Marcus didn't fully trust her yet, but she was FBI. If something went wrong, she had resources to call for help. And Harold needed someone to watch over him. "You sure about this?" Reaper asked as they approached the valley. "No," Marcus admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway. That's the stone I remember." Reaper pulled the truck into a grove of trees about 2 miles from the Bennett Ranch. "This is as far as I go. Webb's perimeter starts a 1/4 mile ahead. Motion sensors, cameras, regular patrols." "How many men?" 8 to 10 rotating shifts. Plus, Webb himself shows up every few hours to check on things. Marcus nodded. "Give me 3 hours, if I'm not back by then. I'll come in guns blazing and pull you out, just like Fallujah." Despite everything, Marcus felt himself smile. That was a hell of a day. They all were. Reaper clasped his shoulder. "Go get what you came for, brother." Marcus stepped out of the truck. Shadow jumped down beside him. Eleanor followed, moving more quietly than he expected for a woman her age. "Ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for 2 years." Eleanor's voice was steel. "Let's finish what Jake started." They moved into the darkness. The ranch was a graveyard. Even in the moonlight, Marcus could see the devastation. The main house was nothing but charred timbers and ash. The barn had collapsed into a heap of blackened wood. The fences were torn down, the livestock pens empty. But Eleanor was right. The oak tree still stood. It rose from the center of the property like a sentinel, its bare branches reaching toward the stars. Even stripped of leaves, it radiated a kind of stubborn permanence, a living thing that had survived fires and droughts and decades of hard winters. "Jake used to climb to the top," Eleanor whispered. "He said he could see all the way to Canada from up there." Harold told him that was nonsense, but Jake believed it anyway. Marcus scanned the area. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, moving in predictable patterns. A third sat in a vehicle near the ruined house, probably catching a nap between rounds. "Stay here," Marcus said. "I'll clear the path." "What are you going to do?" "What I was trained to do." He moved through the shadows like smoke. The first guard never saw him coming. Marcus caught him from behind, applying pressure to the carotid until the man went limp. He lowered him silently to the ground. The second guard was trickier. He was alert, nervous, his hand resting on his weapon. But he made the mistake of stopping to light a cigarette, his night vision ruined by the flame. Marcus closed the distance in 3 seconds. When the man hit the ground, Shadow materialized beside him, ready to guard the unconscious body. "Good boy. Stay." The third guard was still asleep in the vehicle. Marcus approached carefully, reached through the open window, and grabbed the man's collar before he could wake. "Don't move. Don't scream. Nod if you understand." The man nodded frantically. "Where's Webb?" "I don't." Marcus tightened his grip. "Where?" "He left 2 hours ago. Said he had a meeting in town. He won't be back until dawn." "How many more men are watching this property?" "Just us 3 tonight. Budget cuts. Harlan's pulling resources for something bigger." "What something?" "I don't know. I swear they don't tell us anything." Marcus believed him. Men like this were disposable hired muscle who knew just enough to do their jobs and nothing more. He applied pressure until the man passed out, then signaled to Eleanor. She moved quickly across the open ground, her eyes fixed on the oak tree. When she reached it, she fell to her knees in the snow. "Right here," she whispered. "Jake always said the roots on the east side were hollow. He used to hide things there as a boy. Treasures, he called them. His little secret place." Marcus pulled out a compact shovel from his pack and began digging. The ground was frozen, the work brutal, but he had dug through worse in worse conditions. 6 inches down, he hit something hard. "There," Eleanor breathed. That's it. Marcus cleared the dirt away, revealing a metal box about the size of a shoebox. It was rusted, weathered, but intact. He pried it open. Inside was a USB drive, a bundle of photographs, and a single piece of paper with coordinates written in neat handwriting. Jake's insurance policy, Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. He was so scared at the end, but he never stopped fighting. Marcus pocketed everything and helped Eleanor to her feet. We need to go. Now. They were halfway back to the tree line when the lights hit them. Headlights, coming up the ranch road fast. Move! Marcus grabbed Eleanor's arm and pulled her toward the shadows. But they were too slow. A vehicle screeched to a stop 30 feet away. Doors flew open. Men poured out, weapons raised, and in the center of them stood Sheriff Carter Webb. Well, well, Webb said, his smile visible even in the darkness. Marcus Stone, I was hoping you'd be stupid enough to come back. Marcus pushed Eleanor behind him, shielding her with his body. Run, he whispered. Get to Reaper. I won't leave you. Eleanor, I said no. Her voice cracked, but didn't break. Jake died alone. I won't let that happen again. Webb stepped forward, his deputies fanning out to surround them. 8 men, all armed, all focused on Marcus like predators watching prey. You've caused me a lot of trouble, Stone. Cost me 4 men at your cabin. Made me look like a fool in front of Harlan. Webb's smile faded. Do you have any idea how much paperwork that generates? Let her go, Marcus said. This is between you and me. Actually, it isn't. The old woman and her husband are the real targets. You're just the idiot who got in the way. Webb gestured to his men. Search him. Whatever he dug up belongs to us. 2 deputies moved forward. Marcus could have fought. Could have taken out 2, maybe 3, before they overwhelmed him. But Eleanor was right behind him, defenseless, and any fight would put her in the crossfire. He raised his hands slowly. Smart choice, Webb said, as his men pulled the metal box from Marcus's jacket. You know Harlan wanted you dead, but I convinced him you might be useful. A former SEAL decorated, experienced a man like that could be valuable to our organization. I'd rather die. That can be arranged. But think about it first. Webb opened the box and examined the contents. You've seen what we're capable of, the power we have. Join us and you'll be protected. Wealthy, respected. All you have to do is walk away from these 2. Marcus met Webb's eyes. You killed Jake Bennett. You burned down an old couple's home. You murdered 12 innocent people to protect your profits. His voice was quiet, deadly. I will never join you. And I will never stop coming for you. Webb's expression hardened. Then you'll die with them. He raised his weapon, and that's when Shadow struck. The dog had been circling through the darkness, invisible, patient, waiting for the perfect moment. He launched himself at the nearest deputy, 70 pounds of muscle and fury hitting the man in the back. The formation broke. Marcus moved. He caught the first man with an elbow to the throat, grabbed his weapon, and fired twice before anyone could react. 2 deputies went down. Get to cover, he shouted at Eleanor. She ran. Webb fired wildly, his shots going wide, as Marcus rolled behind a fallen tree. Shadow had already taken down a second man and was circling for a third. Kill him, Webb screamed. Kill them all. But his men were panicking now. They had expected easy targets, not a trained killer, and a war dog working in perfect coordination. Marcus picked them off one by one. 3 more fell before Webb realized he was losing. Fall back to the vehicles. The surviving deputies scrambled for the SUVs. Webb retreated, with them firing over his shoulder, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over, Stone! You hear me? This isn't over!" The vehicles roared to life and tore down the ranch road, leaving their fallen comrades behind. Marcus stayed in position, breathing hard, waiting for a second wave that didn't come. When the silence returned, he stood. Shadow limped toward him, blood on his muzzle, but tail wagging. "Good boy." Marcus knelt and checked the dog for injuries. "You did good." Eleanor emerged from behind the oak tree. Her face was pale, her hands shaking, but she was alive. "You got the evidence?" Marcus asked. She held up the USB drive. "I grabbed it when you were fighting. Jake would have wanted me to protect it." Marcus nodded. "Then let's get out of here before Webb comes back with reinforcements." They moved toward the tree line where Reaper was waiting. But as they walked, Marcus felt the weight of what had just happened settling over him. Webb had escaped. Webb would report to Harlan, and Harlan would report to Crawford. The senator would know they had the evidence now, would know they were coming for him. The war had just begun. And somewhere in the distance, Marcus could have sworn he heard the sound of helicopters. Reaper met them at the truck, his face grim. "Heard the gunfire. Figured you'd need a quick exit." "Webb got away. He'll be calling Harlan right now." "Then we need to move. I've got a safe house in Wyoming, completely off the grid. We can regroup there." Eleanor climbed into the truck, her hand clutching the USB drive like a lifeline. Shadow jumped in beside her, curling up at her feet. Marcus hesitated. "There's something else. Harold mentioned coordinates in Jake's box. A secondary location." "For what? I don't know yet, but Jake didn't hide something in 2 places unless it was important." Reaper started the engine. "One thing at a time, brother. Let's get clear first. Then we figure out our next move." They drove through the darkness, leaving the burning remains of the Bennett Ranch behind. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Crawford knew about the evidence now, knew they were coming for him. A man with his power, his resources, his connections wouldn't wait for them to make the next move. He would strike first. And when he did, God help anyone caught in his path. Marcus looked down at Shadow, then at Eleanor, then at the USB drive in her weathered hands. Jake Bennett had died for this. Harold Bennett had nearly died for this. Danny Cruz had died because of the same men who were hunting them now. No more running. No more hiding. It was time to fight back. The safe house in Wyoming was a converted hunting lodge buried deep in the Bighorn Mountains, so remote that even satellites struggled to find it. Harold was waiting when they arrived. Rachel had managed to move him despite his condition, and the old man had refused to stay behind once he heard Eleanor was in danger. He sat in a chair by the fireplace, pale and weak, but his eyes lit up the moment his wife walked through the door. "Eleanor." His voice cracked. She crossed the room in 3 steps and fell into his arms. They held each other without speaking. 52 years of marriage compressed into a single embrace. Marcus looked away. The intimacy of the moment felt too raw to witness. Rachel approached him quietly. "You got it." He handed her the USB drive. "Jake's insurance policy. Everything we need." "And Webb escaped. He'll have reported to Harlan by now, which means Crawford knows we have the evidence." Rachel's jaw tightened. "Then we're running out of time. Crawford will try to bury this before we can act." "Can you access the files? I brought equipment. Give me an hour." She disappeared into a back room with the USB drive. Marcus watched her go, still uncertain whether to trust her completely. Chen had been her partner, her friend. If she was wrong about him, she could be wrong about other things too. Shadow nudged his leg. "I know, boy." Marcus scratched behind the dog's ears. I don't like waiting either. Reaper appeared beside him. You need to see something. What? The coordinates from Jake's box. I ran them through my mapping software. Reaper's expression was grim. They point to a location about 40 miles from here, an abandoned facility. Used to be a research station, but it's been dark for years. Why would Jake hide something there? That's what I'm wondering. The facility was owned by a company called Clearwater Industries. Ring any bells? Marcus frowned. No. It should. Clearwater was a subsidiary of Northern Peak. They ran water quality tests for the state government until 2019, when they suddenly shut down. No explanation. All records sealed. Sealed by who? Senator Crawford's office. The pieces clicked into place. Jake didn't just find evidence of corruption, Marcus said slowly. He found where they were hiding the bodies. Metaphorically or literally? I don't know yet, but we need to find out. Rachel emerged 40 minutes later, her face ashen. You need to hear this, she said. All of you. They gathered around a laptop she had set up on the kitchen table. Eleanor held Harold's hand. Reaper stood with his arms crossed. Shadow lay at Marcus's feet, alert but calm. Rachel pressed play. Jake Bennett's voice filled the room clear and steady despite the fear underneath. This recording was made on October 15th, 2022, at approximately 11 p.m. I am documenting a conversation I witnessed between Victor Harlan, CEO of Northern Peak Mining Corp., and Senator William Crawford. A pause. Then two new voices, slightly distorted, but recognizable. The Bennett situation is becoming problematic. Harlan's voice was cold, businesslike. The old man is asking questions. His son is worse. They've been digging into our water extraction records. Then make them stop. Crawford's voice carried the casual authority of a man accustomed to having his orders followed. We've handled problems like this before. Jake Bennett is a former Marine. He's not some elderly farmer we can intimidate. Then don't intimidate him. Eliminate him. Make it look like an accident. You've done it before. A long pause. That will cost extra. I don't care what it costs. The White Pine Aquifer is worth $12 billion. We're not letting some family of dirt farmers stand in the way of that. Do whatever it takes. The recording ended. Eleanor was crying silently. Harold's face had turned to stone. That's it, Rachel said quietly. That's a sitting United States Senator ordering the murder of an American citizen. Combined with the financial records, the photographs, and Jake's documentation of the previous deaths, we have enough to bring down Crawford Harlan and everyone connected to them. Then why aren't we celebrating? Reaper asked. Because Crawford knows we have this, and a man who's ordered 12 murders won't hesitate to order more. Rachel looked at Marcus. We need to move fast. Get this evidence to someone we can trust before Crawford can stop us. Who? Marcus demanded. Your partner was the mole. How do we know there aren't more? We don't. But I know one person who's beyond Crawford's reach. Judge Patricia Morrison, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. She's been investigating political corruption for years, and she has the authority to issue federal warrants without going through normal channels. Can you contact her? I can try, but Crawford will be monitoring all my communications. If I reach out directly, he'll know. Marcus thought for a moment. Then we don't reach out directly. We deliver the evidence in person. Morrison is in San Francisco. That's over 1,000 miles from here. Then we'd better start driving. They split into two groups. Rachel would take the evidence to Judge Morrison through a route designed to avoid detection. Multiple vehicles, multiple stops, no digital trail. Reaper would escort her, providing security and firepower if needed. Marcus, Eleanor, Harold, and Shadow would stay behind as decoys, drawing Crawford's attention away from the real operation. You're sure about this? Eleanor asked as they prepared to separate. Crawford will expect us to run. He'll focus his resources on finding me, not Rachel. Marcus met her eyes. It's the best chance we have. And if they find you, then I'll buy Rachel enough time to finish what Jake started. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and touched his face, a gesture so maternal that it caught Marcus off guard. You remind me of Jake, she said softly. The same stubbornness, the same refusal to quit. He would have liked you. I wish I could have met him. You did. Through his evidence, through his courage, through everything he sacrificed to protect people he'd never know. Eleanor's voice strengthened. My son died a hero. Don't let anyone tell you different. I won't. Rachel appeared in the doorway. We're ready. Marcus walked her to the vehicle. Shadow followed, always watching, always alert. Be careful, Marcus said. Crawford has people everywhere. Trust no one. I know how to handle myself. I'm serious, Rachel. This isn't a normal case. These people don't follow rules. They don't negotiate. They destroy anyone who threatens them. Rachel met his gaze steadily. I became an FBI agent because I believed in justice. Real justice, not the kind that gets bought and sold by men like Crawford. I've spent 18 months building this case, watching guilty men walk free, wondering if anything I did mattered. She took a breath. Jake Bennett died trying to do the right thing. I won't let his sacrifice be meaningless. Marcus nodded slowly. Then go. And don't stop until Morrison has everything. Reaper started the engine. Rachel climbed in. As they drove away, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not hope, exactly. Something harder. Something more dangerous. Purpose. The attack came at dawn. Marcus was on watch when Shadow's growl woke the others. The dog's hackles rose, his body rigid with tension. Someone's coming, Marcus said, grabbing his rifle. Get to the basement. How many? Harold asked, already helping Eleanor to her feet. I don't know yet, but Shadow doesn't react like that to small numbers. They moved quickly. The basement was reinforced, stocked with supplies and weapons. If they could hold out long enough, Reaper had left emergency extraction protocols that would bring help within hours. But Marcus knew they might not have hours. He positioned himself near the front window. Through the pre-dawn darkness, he could see vehicles approaching 4 SUVs moving in tactical formation. Not Webb's men. These were professionals. Military contractors. The kind of operators Crawford would send when he wanted something done right. Stay down, Marcus called to the basement. No matter what you hear, don't come up. Marcus, Eleanor's voice. Promise me. A pause. Then, I promise. Marcus checked his ammunition. 30 rounds in the rifle. 15 in his sidearm, plus whatever Reaper had left behind. Not enough. Nowhere close to enough. But he had faced worse odds. And he had Shadow. You ready, boy? The dog's answering growl was all the response Marcus needed. The first vehicle stopped 100 yards out. Men poured from the SUVs, 12, 15, maybe more. They moved with the precision of trained soldiers, spreading out to surround the lodge. A bullhorn crackled. Marcus Stone, this is Victor Harlan. I know you can hear me. Marcus stayed silent. I'm going to make this simple. You have something that belongs to me, evidence that my associates would prefer not become public. Hand it over and you and the Bennetts can walk away. Refuse, and everyone in that building dies. Still, Marcus said nothing. You have 60 seconds to decide. Marcus moved to a different window, counting positions. 12 men on the perimeter, 2 more in each vehicle. At least 4 snipers in elevated positions. 20+ hostiles, all armed, all trained. And then he saw something that changed everything. A fifth vehicle hanging back from the others. Black sedan. Government plates. Through the tinted windshield, Marcus caught a glimpse of silver hair. A face he recognized from television, from campaign posters, from Jake Bennett's evidence. Senator William Crawford had come in person. "That arrogant son of a bitch," Marcus muttered. Crawford thought he was untouchable, thought his power protected him from consequences. He had come to witness the destruction of his enemies, to savor their defeat firsthand. It was the first mistake he had ever made. And Marcus intended to make it his last. 30 seconds, Stone. Marcus keyed his radio. "Reaper, you copy? Static. Then, copy. We're 4 hours out. What's your situation? 20+ hostiles. Harlan's leading them. And Crawford is here personally." A pause. "Say again, Crawford is at your location." "Confirmed. Black sedan, government plates. He's watching from the back." "Jesus." Reaper's voice tightened. "That changes everything. If we can get Crawford on camera at a hostile operation against American citizens, already thinking the same thing, I need you to contact Morrison directly. Tell her what's happening. Get federal marshals here as fast as possible." "That could take hours." "Then I'll give you hours. Marcus, you can't hold off that many men alone." "Watch me." He cut the connection. 10 seconds, Stone. Marcus took a breath. He thought about Danny, about Jake, about all the people who had died because men like Crawford believed they were above the law. Not today. He raised his rifle and put a round through Harlan's bullhorn. The device exploded in the CEO's hands, sending him stumbling backward with a scream of pain. "That's my answer," Marcus shouted. "Come and get it." The firefight was brutal. Marcus had the advantage of position and cover, but Harlan's men had numbers and patience. They didn't rush the lodge. Instead, they methodically worked their way closer, using suppressive fire to keep Marcus pinned while teams flanked from multiple directions. Shadow worked the perimeter like a ghost, attacking any man who strayed too far from cover. The dog took down 3 before they started watching for him, firing at shadows, afraid of what they couldn't see. "Good boy," Marcus breathed between shots. "Keep them scared." An hour passed. 2. Marcus's ammunition began running low. He had wounded 6, killed 2, and delayed them as long as possible. But they were getting closer. Breaching the lodge was only a matter of time. And then he heard it. Helicopters. Not one. Multiple. Coming fast from the east. "What the hell?" someone shouted outside. Marcus risked a look through the window. 3 black helicopters were descending on the clearing. FBI markings. Tactical teams fast roping to the ground before the aircraft had fully landed. And leading them was a woman Marcus had never seen before, a tall, steel-haired figure in a dark suit flanked by federal marshals. "This is Judge Patricia Morrison of the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals," her voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "All personnel are ordered to lay down your weapons immediately. Failure to comply will result in lethal force." Harlan's men hesitated. "Don't listen to her," Harlan screamed. "She has no jurisdiction here. This is Victor Harlan. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, environmental terrorism, and corruption of public officials." Morrison's voice was ice. "Senator Crawford, step out of the vehicle with your hands raised." The black sedan's door didn't move. "Senator Crawford, this is your only warning." A long moment of silence. Then the door opened. William Crawford emerged slowly, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. He was smaller than Marcus expected, a slight man in an expensive suit with silver hair and the cold eyes of someone who had never been told no. "This is outrageous," Crawford spat. "I am a United States Senator. I demand to speak with— You have the right to remain silent." a federal marshal said, spinning him around and slapping cuffs on his wrists. I suggest you use it, my son. Marcus watched from the lodge doorway as the scene unfolded. Harlan was dragged away, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits. His contractors surrendered without further resistance, professionals who knew when a fight was lost. Crawford was loaded into a federal vehicle, his political career ending not with a speech, but with the click of handcuffs. Rachel appeared beside Marcus. He hadn't even seen her arrive. Morrison got the evidence, she said quietly. Every file, every recording, every photograph, it's already being distributed to every major news outlet in the country. By tonight, the whole world will know what Crawford did. How did you get here so fast? Morrison didn't wait for us to reach San Francisco. The moment I contacted her, she mobilized everyone she could trust. Turns out she's been building a case against Crawford for years. Jake's evidence was the final piece she needed. Marcus looked at the black sedan carrying Crawford away. It's over. Not yet. Not. There are trials ahead. Testimony, appeals. Men like Crawford don't go down easy. Rachel paused. But the foundation is broken. Whatever happens next, they can't hide anymore. Eleanor emerged from the basement, Harold leaning heavily on her arm. They walked slowly toward Marcus, their faces showing the exhaustion of people who had been running for too long. Is it true? Eleanor asked. They arrested Crawford. Marcus nodded. Eleanor closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. Jake, she whispered. We did it, baby. We finally did it. Harold put his arm around his wife. For the first time since Marcus had met him, the old man looked at peace. Thank you, Harold said, his voice rough. You gave my son's death meaning. You gave us our lives back. Marcus didn't know how to respond. He had spent 2 years believing he was incapable of saving anyone, that his hesitation, his failure, his guilt had made him worthless. But standing here watching the people he had protected embrace each other, watching justice finally arrive for men who had escaped it for too long, he felt something shift inside him. Not absolution, not forgiveness, but something close. Something that felt like the first step toward healing. Shadow pressed against his leg, warm and solid and real. We did good, Marcus murmured. All of us. The following weeks moved in a blur. News of Crawford's arrest exploded across every platform. The recordings Jake had made played on loop on cable news. Pundits debated the implications. Former allies scrambled to distance themselves. Congressional hearings were scheduled, special prosecutors appointed. Northern Peak Mining Corp was dissolved, its assets seized, its executives facing decades in prison. Sheriff Carter Webb was found 3 days after the raid hiding in a motel near the Canadian border. He surrendered without resistance, broken, and alone, all his power stripped away. The full scope of the conspiracy emerged slowly. 17 murders across 5 states, $400 million in bribes, environmental damage that would take decades to repair, a network of corruption so vast that investigators were still uncovering new connections months later. But in White Pine Valley, the healing had already begun. The government announced full restitution for the Bennett family. Their ranch would be restored. The contaminated aquifer would be cleaned. A memorial would be built, honoring Jake and the other victims. Harold's health improved with each passing day. The infection cleared. His strength returned. And for the first time in 2 years, he talked about the future instead of the past. We're going to rebuild, he told Marcus one morning. Every fence, every barn, Every inch of land those bastards tried to take from us. You sure you're up for that? I'm 78 years old. I've buried my son and watched my home burn. If I can survive that, I can survive a little construction work." Eleanor smiled a real smile, not the fragile ghost Marcus had seen on the night they first arrived at his cabin. "You'll come visit, won't you?" she asked. "When we're settled?" Marcus hesitated. He hadn't thought about what came next. His cabin on Grizzly Ridge was still standing. His life of isolation was still waiting for him, but the thought of returning to that silence, that emptiness, that slow suffocation of solitude, it no longer felt like refuge. It felt like death. "I'll visit," he said. "That's a promise." On the day the Bennetts left for Montana, Marcus drove them to the airport himself. Shadow sat in the back seat between Harold and Eleanor, his head resting on Eleanor's lap. The dog had grown attached to the old couple over the past weeks, and the feeling was clearly mutual. "You could come with us," Eleanor said as they pulled up to the terminal. "There's plenty of room on the ranch. Shadow would love it." "I know." Marcus helped unload their bags. "But there's something I need to do first." "What?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, creased, faded, but carefully preserved. Danny Cruz smiled back from the image, young and vital, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. "I need to visit an old friend," Marcus said quietly. "Tell him what happened. Tell him I finally understand." Eleanor's eyes glistened. She reached up and touched his face, the same maternal gesture she had offered before. "Danny knows," she said softly. "Wherever he is, he knows. And he's proud of you." Marcus couldn't speak. The words caught in his throat. Harold clasped his shoulder. "You saved our lives, son. You gave us justice when no one else would. That's not something we'll ever forget." "Take care of each other," Marcus managed. "We always have." Harold smiled. 52 years and counting." They walked into the terminal, two elderly figures leaning on each other, moving slowly but steadily toward whatever came next. Marcus watched until they disappeared through the security checkpoint. Then he climbed back into the truck, Shadow beside him, and drove toward the place he had been avoiding for 2 years. Danny Cruz was buried in a small cemetery outside Billings. Marcus hadn't visited since the funeral. Hadn't been able to face the headstone, the dates, the finality of knowing his best friend was gone. But today was different. He knelt in front of the grave, Shadow sitting quietly beside him. The wind whispered through the grass. Somewhere distant, a bird sang. "Hey, brother." Marcus's voice cracked. "It's been a while." He told Danny everything. The cabin, the isolation, the 2 years of hiding from the world and from himself. The knock at the door, the Bennetts, the conspiracy, the fight. He told him about Crawford, about Harlan, about Jake Bennett, a Marine who had died trying to protect his family. And he told him the truth he had been running from since Syria. "I blamed myself for your death. Every day for 2 years I blamed myself. I thought if I had been faster, smarter, better, you'd still be here." Marcus wiped his eyes. "But I was wrong. You didn't die because I hesitated. You died because evil men valued profit over people, and I spent 2 years hiding while they kept killing." He placed Danny's photograph against the headstone. "I'm done hiding, brother. I'm done running. Whatever time I have left, I'm going to use it to fight for people who can't fight for themselves, like the Bennetts, like Jake." He took a shaky breath. "Like you would have wanted." Shadow pressed against his side, warm and steady. Marcus stayed at the grave until the sun began to set. Then he stood, touched the cold stone one final time, and walked back to his truck. His phone buzzed as he climbed in. A text from Rachel Torres. Morrison wants to see you. Says she has a proposal. Something about consulting for the FBI's Environmental Crimes Division. Interested? Marcus looked at Shadow. The dog's tail wagged once. He typed his response. Tell her I'm on my way. The meeting with Judge Morrison lasted 3 hours. Marcus sat across from her in a federal building in Helena Shadow, lying quietly at his feet. The judge was exactly what he had expected. Sharp, direct, with eyes that had seen enough corruption to make most people cynical, but instead had made her determined. The FBI's Environmental Crimes Division has been underfunded and understaffed for years, Morrison said, sliding a folder across the table. Crawford used his influence to keep it that way. Now that he's gone, we have an opportunity to rebuild it properly. But we need people with certain skills. What kind of skills? The kind that took down a corrupt senator, a CEO, and a sheriff in less than 2 weeks. Morrison leaned forward. You have combat, training, investigative instincts, and a moral compass that doesn't bend under pressure. Those are rare qualities, Mr. Stone. I'm not a cop. No, you're something better. You're someone who gets things done when the system fails. She tapped the folder. This is a consulting contract. You'd work with Rachel Torres's team on high-priority cases. No bureaucracy, no politics, just the work. Marcus looked at the folder. 6 months ago, he would have refused without hesitation. He had wanted nothing but silence, solitude, escape. But 6 months ago, he hadn't met Harold and Eleanor Bennett, hadn't heard Jake's recordings, hadn't remembered what it felt like to fight for something that mattered. What's the first case? He asked. Morrison's expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes, satisfaction perhaps, or relief. There's a situation in West Virginia. A mining company contaminating water supplies. 3 whistleblowers have died in the past year. Local law enforcement is compromised. She paused. Sound familiar? Marcus felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Taking this job meant stepping back into a world he had fled. It meant danger, uncertainty, the constant risk of failure. But it also meant purpose, meaning, the chance to prevent other families from suffering what the Bennetts had endured. He picked up the pen and signed the contract. When do I start? 3 weeks later, Marcus drove into White Pine Valley for the first time since the raid. The changes were visible everywhere. Construction crews worked on damaged roads. Environmental teams tested water samples from the aquifer. News vans from national networks lined the main street, reporters delivering updates on the ongoing trials. But Marcus wasn't here for any of that. He was here for a reunion. The Bennett Ranch had been transformed. Where blackened ruins once stood, a new house was taking shape, frame already up, walls going, in a team of volunteers working alongside professional contractors. Eleanor had told him the community had rallied around them, neighbors who had been too afraid to help before Crawford's arrest, now showing up with tools and lumber and determination. Harold spotted him first. The old man was sitting on a makeshift bench near the construction site, looking stronger than Marcus had ever seen him. His color had returned. His eyes were bright. He moved slowly when he stood, but he moved under his own power. Stone. Harold clasped his hand with both of his. You came. Promised I would. Eleanor's inside the temporary shelter. She's been cooking all morning. Said if you showed up hungry, she'd never forgive you. Marcus smiled. Then I'd better not disappoint her. They walked together toward a large tent that served as the family's temporary home. Shadow bounded ahead, tail wagging, drawn by familiar scents and the memory of warmth. Eleanor emerged before they reached the entrance. She wore an apron dusted with flour. Her silver hair pulled back, her face creased with a smile that seemed to erase years of grief. Marcus Stone. She pulled him into a fierce hug. You're late. I expected you 2 hours ago. Got held up in town. Lots of reporters. Vultures, all of them. Though I suppose they're useful vultures now. Eleanor stepped back and studied his face. You look different. Less tired. Less haunted. I feel different. Good, that's good. She took his arm and led him toward the tent. There's someone I want you to meet. Inside the tent, a young woman sat at a folding table. 2 children pressed close against her sides. Sarah Bennett was in her mid-30s, with Jake's dark hair and Eleanor's gentle features. She had the watchful eyes of someone who had learned to be afraid, but beneath the wariness, Marcus saw strength. The same stubborn resilience that ran through the entire Bennett family. The children were exactly as Eleanor had described. Emma, 8 years old, with pigtails and a serious expression. Noah, 6, clutching a toy soldier with one hand and his mother's sleeve with the other. Sarah, Eleanor's voice softened. This is Marcus Stone, the man I told you about. Sarah rose slowly. Her eyes moved over Marcus's face, searching for something, threat perhaps, or judgment. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. My in-laws told me what you did, she said quietly. They said you saved their lives, that you fought for my husband's evidence when no one else would. Jake did the hard part. I just finished what he started. No. Sarah shook her head. Jake was brave, but he was alone. You made sure his courage wasn't wasted. Her voice cracked. My children will grow up knowing their father was a hero because of you. Marcus didn't know how to respond. The gratitude in her eyes was overwhelming, undeserved. Then Noah tugged at his mother's sleeve. Mommy, is that the soldier man? Yes, baby. This is Mr. Stone. Noah studied Marcus with the fearless curiosity of childhood. Grandpa says you have a dog that fights bad guys. Is that true? On cue. Shadow padded through the tent entrance. The German shepherd's ears perked at the sight of the children. Noah's face lit up. Can I pet him? Marcus knelt to the boy's level. Shadow meet Noah. Noah meet Shadow. He's friendly, but he likes to be asked nicely. Noah approached slowly, one hand extended. Shadow sniffed the offered fingers, then licked them once his version of approval. He likes me. Noah turned to his sister. Emma, look, the soldier dog likes me. Emma approached more cautiously. She was old enough to understand what had happened to her father, old enough to carry fear alongside hope. But when Shadow nudged her hand gently, something in her expression softened. He's warm, she whispered. He's been keeping people warm for a long time, Marcus said. It's what he does best. Eleanor watched the scene with tears in her eyes. Harold put his arm around her. Jake would have loved this, Eleanor murmured. Seeing his children smile again. Seeing his family together. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He had come to White Pine Valley as a broken man seeking only escape. Now he stood in the midst of a family rebuilding itself from ashes, watching children laugh with his dog, feeling something he had almost forgotten how to name. Belonging. The dedication ceremony took place 3 days later. The town of White Pine Valley gathered at the site where Jake Bennett had been killed. Where once there had been only a cold field and a lie about a hunting accident, now there stood a memorial, a granite stone engraved with Jake's name, his military service, and the words he had lived and died by. Truth, courage, justice. The governor attended. So did Senator Martinez Crawford's replacement, who had promised to champion environmental protection legislation in Jake's honor. Reporters documented every moment, but the people who mattered most stood at the front. Harold and Eleanor, Sarah and the children, Marcus and Shadow. When it came time for speeches, Harold was the first to step forward. His voice was thin but steady, carrying across the crowd with the quiet authority of a man who had earned every word through suffering. My son was not a politician. He was not a celebrity. He was a Marine, a father, and a rancher's boy who believed that ordinary people could make a difference. Harold paused, his jaw tightening. He was murdered for that belief. Murdered by men who thought their money and their power made them untouchable. The crowd was silent. But Jake didn't die in vain. His evidence brought down a senator, a corporation, and a network of corruption that had poisoned this valley for years. His courage inspired others to stand up when standing up seemed impossible. Harold's eyes found Marcus. And his legacy will live on in the people who refused to let his sacrifice be forgotten. Eleanor stepped forward to stand beside her husband. "We want to thank everyone who helped bring justice to our family," she said. "The FBI agents who investigated, the judge who issued the warrants, the neighbors who rebuilt our home." Her voice caught. "And one man who opened his door on the coldest night of the year and chose compassion over indifference." She extended her hand toward Marcus. Marcus Stone lost his own brother in arms. He came to these mountains to escape his grief. But when we needed help, he didn't turn away. He fought for us, bled for us, risked everything for two strangers who knocked on his door in a blizzard. Eleanor's eyes glistened. Jake would have called him a brother. And so do we. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stood frozen, overwhelmed. He had never sought recognition, never wanted praise. He had simply done what needed to be done. But as the crowd cheered, as Harold and Eleanor embraced him, as Sarah's children waved, and Shadow barked with excitement, Marcus felt something break inside him. Not the kind of breaking that destroys, the kind that heals. After the ceremony, Rachel Torres found him standing alone near Jake's memorial. "Hell of a speech," she said, falling into step beside him. "I didn't deserve it." "That's not what anyone else thinks." Rachel paused. "Morrison called. The West Virginia case is moving faster than expected. She wants us on site by next week." Marcus nodded slowly. "Us? You didn't think you were doing this alone, did you?" Rachel's expression softened. "We make a good team, Stone, and Shadow's clearance already went through. Apparently the FBI is willing to make exceptions for war heroes." Shadow's ears perked at his name. His tail wagged once. "What about Harold and Eleanor?" Marcus asked. "They just got their family back. I can't leave them unprotected." "Reaper's got that covered. He's moving to White Pine Valley permanently. Says he's retired from active work, but he wouldn't mind keeping an eye on some friends." Rachel smiled. "Your people are protected. Now it's time to protect some others." Marcus looked at the memorial. Jake's name carved in stone. The dates of a life cut short. The truth finally acknowledged. "Jake was investigating for 8 months before they killed him," Marcus said quietly. 8 months of gathering evidence, building a case, trying to do the right thing. And he almost made it. If he'd had backup, if he'd had someone to watch his back. "He might still be alive," Rachel finished. "I know. That's why Morrison wants to build something new. A task force specifically designed to protect whistleblowers and investigate corporate crimes. People like Jake. People who need help before it's too late. And she wants me involved. She wants you leading it." Marcus turned to face her. "Leading it. You have skills most agents spend careers trying to develop. You think tactically. You improvise under pressure. You inspire loyalty." Rachel met his eyes. "Morrison believes you could build something that actually makes a difference. So do I." The weight of the offer pressed down on Marcus. Leading a task force meant responsibility. It meant making decisions that could cost lives if he got them wrong. It meant stepping fully out of the shadows and into a role he had never imagined for himself. But it also meant protecting people like the Bennetts, like Jake, like all the families who would face powerful enemies without anyone to fight for them. "I'll think about it," Marcus said. "Don't think too long. West Virginia won't wait." That night, Marcus sat on the porch of the Bennetts' temporary shelter Shadow at his feet. The stars were brilliant overhead, unpolluted by city lights. The same stars he had watched from his cabin on Grizzly Ridge night after night, alone with his grief and his guilt. But he wasn't alone anymore. Eleanor appeared beside him, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She sat down without speaking, handing him 1 cup, keeping the other for herself. They drank in comfortable silence. "You're leaving tomorrow," Eleanor said finally. It wasn't a question. "Rachel got word about the West Virginia case. We need to be on site by Monday. And after that, I don't know, Morrison wants me to lead some kind of task force, protecting whistleblowers, investigating corporate crimes." Eleanor nodded slowly. Jake would have loved that. He always said the system needed people on the insit who weren't afraid to fight dirty. "I'm not sure I'm the right person." "Why not?" Marcus stared at his coffee. "Because I failed before. Danny died because I hesitated. What if I hesitate again? What if I get someone else killed?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Marcus, do you know why Harold and I kept fighting after Jake died? Why we didn't just give up and let Crawford win? No. Because Jake taught us that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite the fear. It's getting up every morning knowing you might fail and doing the right thing anyway." She turned to face him. "You hesitated once. One time in impossible circumstances with faulty equipment and bad intel and everything working against you, and you've punished yourself for it ever since. Danny would be furious with you." Eleanor's voice sharpened. "You think he'd want you hiding on a mountain, drowning in guilt? You think he'd want you refusing to help people because you're afraid of failing again?" Marcus couldn't speak. "The man who knocked on your door in that blizzard didn't hesitate. The man who fought off a dozen armed men didn't hesitate. The man who protected my family when no one else would didn't hesitate." Eleanor's hand found his. "That man isn't someone who freezes under pressure. That man is a leader, a protector, a hero." "I don't feel like a hero." "Heroes never do." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "That's how you know they're real." The next morning, Marcus packed his bag. Shadow watched from the doorway, already sensing the change in routine. The dog had spent weeks recovering from the fight at the ranch, his limp finally gone, his energy restored. He was ready for whatever came next. Harold met him at the truck. "You take care of yourself out there," the old man said, clasping his hand. "And take care of that dog. He's earned a peaceful retirement, but I suspect he's not ready to stop fighting yet." "Neither am I." "Good. The world needs more fighters." Harold paused. "You know you always have a home here, whenever you need it, however long you need it." "I know. Thank you." Eleanor's goodbye was longer, more emotional. She held him the way a mother holds a son, tight and fierce and full of prayers. "Come back to us," she whispered. "Come back safe." "I will." Sarah stood nearby with Emma and Noah. The children had grown attached to Shadow over the past weeks, and their farewell to the dog was tearful. "Will you bring him back to visit?" Noah asked, wiping his eyes. "I promise." "Cross your heart." Marcus knelt to the boy's level. Cross my heart." Noah threw his arms around Shadow's neck. The dog stood patient and still, allowing the embrace, his tail wagging gently. Emma approached more slowly. She had her father's eyes serious and thoughtful, carrying weight beyond her years. "My daddy was a soldier too," she said quietly. "Mommy says he died trying to help people." "He did. He was very brave." "Are you going to help people too?" Marcus nodded. "I'm going to try." Emma studied him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a tarnished silver coin with an eagle on one side. "This was my daddy's lucky charm. He gave it to me before... She pressed it into Marcus's hand. "You should have it. For luck." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Emma, I can't take this. It belonged to your father." "I know. But Grandma says Daddy would want you to have it. She says you're like him, a good person who fights for other people." Emma's chin lifted. "Please take it, so you'll come back safe." Marcus looked at the coin, at Emma's earnest face, at the family that had adopted him as one of their own. "I'll take care of it," he said hoarsely. "And I'll bring it back, I promise." The drive out of White Pine Valley felt different than the drive in. Marcus had arrived broken-haunted, running from a past he couldn't escape. He was leaving whole. Not healed healing took time, but whole. Connected. Purposeful. Shadow sat in the passenger seat, watching the mountains scroll past. "You ready for this, boy?" Marcus asked. The dog's tail wagged. "Me neither, but we're doing it anyway." His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Plane leaves in 4 hours. Don't be late." Marcus smiled slightly. 4 hours to reach the airport. Then a flight to West Virginia. Then a new case, a new fight, a new chance to make a difference. He thought about Jake Bennett, who had died trying to protect his community. About Danny Cruz, who had died trying to save his brothers. About all the people who stood up against injustice, knowing it might cost them everything. And he thought about the Bennetts, Harold and Eleanor Sarah, and the children rebuilding their lives on land that had been stolen and returned carrying forward a legacy of courage that would outlast any conspiracy. Marcus placed Jake's lucky coin on the dashboard where he could see it. Then he pressed the accelerator and drove toward whatever came next. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a courtroom in Charleston, West Virginia. The mining executives he had helped bring down sat at the defendant's table, their expensive lawyers unable to save them from the evidence Rachel's team had compiled. 3 more whistleblowers had been protected. 2 more contaminated water supplies had been traced to their source. Another network of corruption had been exposed. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. For every case they closed, a dozen more waited. For every criminal they convicted, others took their place. But it was something. Judge Morrison had been right. The task force worked. With proper resources and people who couldn't be bought, they could make a difference, one case at a time, one family at a time, one act of courage at a time. After the verdict, Marcus stepped outside to call Eleanor. "Guilty on all counts," he reported. "They're going away for a long time." "Oh, Marcus." Eleanor's voice was thick with emotion. "Jake would be so proud." "How's everyone?" "Harold's teaching Noah to fish. Emma started a school project about environmental protection, says she wants to be a lawyer when she grows up. Sarah's sleeping through the night again." Eleanor paused. "And we planted a garden around the oak tree, the one where Jake hid his evidence. It's blooming now. Prettiest thing you've ever seen." Marcus closed his eyes. He could picture it, the new house rising where the old one burned, the memorial standing where justice had been denied, the garden growing where secrets had been buried. Life continuing, hope persisting, love enduring. "I'll be home soon," he said. "Just one more case." "There's always one more case." "I know, but this is what Jake would have wanted, what Danny would have wanted. Protecting people who can't protect themselves." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "You've become the man they both believed you could be, Marcus. Never forget that." "I won't." He ended the call and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, Danny Cruz was watching. Jake Bennett was watching. All the people who had sacrificed everything for truth and justice were watching. And Marcus Stone would not let them down. Shadow appeared beside him, having waited patiently in Rachel's car during the trial. The dog pressed against his leg, warm, steady, loyal. "Ready for the next one?" Marcus asked. Shadow's tail wagged. They walked together toward the car, toward Rachel, toward whatever battle waited next. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels or blinding light. Sometimes they come quietly, like a knock on a cabin door in the middle of a storm, like a stranger choosing compassion over fear, like a broken soldier finding a reason to stand tall again. Marcus Stone had sought silence on Grizzly Ridge. He had wanted only escape, only solitude, only the slow fade of a man who believed his best days were behind him. But on the coldest night of the year, 2 elderly strangers collapsed at his door. And in saving them, he saved himself. Harold and Eleanor Bennett lost their son, their home, their faith in a system that had betrayed them. But they never lost their courage. They never stopped fighting. And in the end, their persistence inspired a movement that brought down a senator, a corporation, and a conspiracy that had poisoned their valley for years. Jake Bennett died alone, murdered by men who thought they were untouchable. But his evidence survived. His truth survived. And his children will grow up knowing their father was a hero who changed the world. Danny Cruz fell in a foreign land far from home, serving a country that would never know his name. But his memory lives on in the man he called brother, a man who finally learned that guilt cannot honor the dead, only action can. And Shadow, the war dog, who had seen too much, fought too hard, carried too many scars, found a new mission. Protecting the innocent, guarding the vulnerable, standing beside his partner through every battle, every victory, every moment of doubt. On Grizzly Ridge, a cabin still stands, empty. The wood stove has gone cold. The windows have frosted over. The silence has returned. But Marcus Stone is no longer there. He is in West Virginia fighting for poisoned communities. He is in Montana visiting the family that adopted him as one of their own. He is wherever injustice lurks, and ordinary people need someone to believe in them. He is no longer hiding. He is no longer running. He is exactly where he was always meant to be. Justice was restored not by power or wealth, but by kindness, loyalty, and the unshakable bond between a man and his dog. Between strangers who became family. Between the living and the dead who refuse to be forgotten. And perhaps that is the greatest truth of all, that every act of courage matters. Every choice to help instead of look away. Every moment when ordinary people decide that right is worth fighting for no matter the cost. The night may be cold, the storm may rage, the powerful may seem invincible, but dawn always comes. And for those brave enough to keep fighting, the sunrise is always worth the wait. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We read every single one. Subscribe so you never miss another tale of courage, loyalty, and redemption. And remember, no matter how dark your night feels, your dawn is coming too. You just have to be brave enough to wait for it. God bless you all, and may He guide you through every storm until your own sunrise breaks.